Hey everybody. My name is David Escobedo. I've been performing improv since 1994. I have my undergrad and my MA in drama performance. I used to be a professional actor in Los Angeles, and now I'm doing my PhD in drama, and all my pursuits have been improv related. So my PhD is on collaboration on stage in the moment. So I've been so happy to be asked to be part of this series in Miss Imp. I'm a big fan of Miss Imp, and so I'm going to teach today dynamics. Okay, now, one thing that one thing that I always try to do, because I've been thinking about teaching online improv and all this kind of stuff, is I don't want my tips just to solely be for temporary. Like I was like, now that we're quarantined and everything, I want my tips to have an impact for your online performances, but then for you to look at them and utilize them on your stage performances. So I'm going to talk about dynamics. Okay. Now dynamics are like differences, and we'll talk a little about this, but this is good on stage as well as online. I'm going to talk about a lot of online choices you can make, and then I'll also talk about how you can use them on stage. Now, dynamics is our differences, highs, lows, close, far, all that kind of stuff. When talking about dynamics, especially in the online format, it's we have to talk about invention and discovery. Okay, now I look at improv as like a language. Okay, it's like a grammar that we learn of how to speak with each other. The thing is, we're not told the content. We're not told the vocabulary. We're not told like, okay, here's how you speak to each other and communicate on stage. But you bring to it your voice. You bring to it your experiences and the characters and all the kind of stuff to communicate. Now, something that's different is like we can look at language as like we could look at language or we could look at the grammar of improv as like a rehearsed speech or a genuine dialogue. So when people really interact in real life, you can kind of tell when they're being fake, right? You can kind of tell when like, oh, this is a politician trying to shake my hand, or you can tell like, oh, this person is not interested in me at all. Or you can really tell when someone's genuinely curious about you, genuinely interested, and you're asking questions and you just vibe and you get that kind of that flow, as Csikszentmihalyi might say, that flow theory. So that's kind of the goal of really good improv. That's why a lot of good improv sets might not be the funniest thing you've ever seen, but you're still drawn into it. Or a lot of scenes might just have you be like on the edge of your seat, but you're not laughing, and they're still very entertaining. So the way we pursue that is by discovery on stage, not by invention. Invention is kind of like that politician who says the same thing to everybody, or pulls out that same joke, right? So invention is coming to something preloaded, like I have this funny idea, or I have this gimmick, and you try to throw it in there. Now, when learning a language, this is a lot of buildup, but when learning a language, there are times that you learn those clunky phrases. Like when I took Spanish in high school, you learn "Donde está la biblioteca?" and "Mi gato es flaco," "Mi gato es gordo." Like you learn these phrases that you normally would not say in everyday life, but it's a slow way to learn the grammar and the vocabulary. So in improv, there are these steps that we do learn to like. Everyone's seen the "I want a divorce" scene. Everyone's seen the like, oh, run a first date scene, but we're learning these phrases or this grammar so that we can be more eloquent as we get better in improv. So I'm going to give you some thoughts on dynamics. This is where it all feeds in, where the first few times that you try it, it will feel invented, it will feel a little clunky, but just experiment with it, especially in rehearsals, especially if you're just doing some fun stuff. And then it should become more natural and more confident that you discover that you're doing these things and you just kind of exaggerate or push them a little bit more for the drama. So that's what I want to say is we're going to hopefully use these skills for dynamics in the discovery process of improv or in a way to be evocative to our scene partner, not provocative, evocative. There's a difference to be evocative to our scene partner. But we're going to, but, and so at first in using these skills, it might seem a little invented, and that's totally fine. Forgive yourself for that. But as we get better, we'll discover that we're doing this and then we'll just expand them out, right? So let's talk about dynamics. So this interaction, which if you watch the Improv Boost, you probably see this drawing. I drew this. I drew this. It's everything that I love. Like there's Gonzo, there's Chewbacca, David Tennant, Mad Hatter from Alice in Wonderland, and then there's like the Dormouse, D20 for rolling, and then a beholder for Dungeons and Dragons. It's a bunch of stuff that I love, right? I didn't know I was going to talk about that. I just discovered right now that I was like, oh, I'm going to talk about this for a second because this is something you might see in the background all the time. But this is something that you might see as you're like seeing shows, you might see this all the time. And this experience is actually very different than this. But then this experience is different than this. So there's so many different ways to convey things. So there's so many different dynamics involved with this. There's so many differences on different sides of different spectrums, and there's so many spectrums going on, and it's all different. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness, it's different. Now, these are all very different examples. but and a lot of them are based in props or change shirts or change environments, and those are things you don't really control or change in an improv set online for sure. But I want to show you is that there are different. That's an example of different dynamics. There's a spectrum, and sometimes it's more than a spectrum. It's more of like a continuum, and then there's different ways you can find yourselves within that continuum that you can mess with. So let's talk about a couple things. I'm considering pulling out my book right now. In fact, I think I am going to pull out my book. Hold on a second. I published a book. It's called This Improv Book. It's available on Amazon. And in it, I talk about dynamics. Look, speak, think, right? So the one that so there's different ways to look, which is, I'll even show you some of the pictures, with your spine, and there's graphics about the differences in your spine and what it means when your spine is in different locations. There's also physicality, facial expressions. Like you'll notice that there's a lot of, it's considered a socially manipulated behavior, and people that are narcissists tend to do it, but when they'll tend to make faces. You'll see Charles Manson do it. You'll see Donald Trump do it. And what happened, the reason they're doing this is a little side note, but the reason they're doing this is it's exhausting your ability to interpret information. Is that while you're talking to them, because they do it while you're talking, they do all these, and they do it while you're talking, and as you're talking, it's putting the focus on them and taking the focus off your ability to critically think. Because your mind is, even if you're going, keep subconsciously, like, even if you're consciously, I'm just going to keep on going forward, subconsciously, your body, your mind is trying to interpret all these micro expressions, okay? So those are dynamics. And faces, you can even think small face or wide face, like so. And then there's also the silhouette. You're thinking, there can be dynamic points of view, which can be like city mouse and country mouse, or it can, so all these kind of things. But the thing I want to talk about, the thing that I think is probably most applicable to online improv, and I guess what I want to say is it's an easy step in, is your speaking voice. I want to talk about your pitch, your tone, your cadence, your quality of voice, right? So let's talk about pitch. Pitch is something that you can easily control, and it can either be like this or it can be like this. And so on that spectrum, you can decide where your pitch is. You have a natural pitch, right, where I'm talking right now. And if you want to look like you're in discovery but not invention in improv, like I said, the first few times you do this, you might be a little bit more, I'm going to come in like this and see what it is. And if it doesn't succeed the way you wanted it to, I want you to celebrate the fact that you took a risk and you learned something new, right? I think a lot of times in improv we focus so much on failure when really what the focus is on, thank you for taking a risk. That's how this art form gets better, is by people taking risks. And the ones that succeed are the ones that we like to celebrate. But I think there's certain teachers out there that like to celebrate the failure, because we just celebrate the fact that you took a risk in the first place. So you might want to enter an improv scene where you just talk a little bit deeper. So that's what I'd say, is you don't need to make a comical animated choice, you just have to make a little, so I'm speaking a little higher than I normally do. Like, and that will change your character. And if you do, the thing is with camera and stage, is on stage, we learn to be big and bold with our movements, but with online and with camera work, we realize that this looks fake and emotionally distant. But if I were to play sad on camera, I might just do this. And it's just subtle, and it's with that maybe swallow of the throat, and then like just the eyes are a little vacant. It's so much more believable, and so and closes emotional distance. It's so much more relatable doing this, because that looks like clownish. It looks broad, right? So your choices can be much smaller. So if I'm going to experiment with pitch, instead of coming to a scene like this, I might come into a scene like this a little bit. Do you notice how the tone is just the pitch is a little different, right? It's a little lower. And I don't know what that's going to say about me, but it's not enough to be unbelievable. It still sounds relatable. I'm still going to discover why my character's like that way, or where the situation makes me that way. So there's pitch. But then tone can also say a lot. So if I'm talking like this is a certain tone of my voice, which a lot of people interpret as being angry or over-explaining things. Or if I get a little more sing-songy. Now, on stage, you might actually talk like this and make your face like this. And that's very broad. And so even when you're in a pub or when you're in a small stage, because of the distance from the person in the back row has to be able to read that emotion as well, it's much more forgiving. Whereas on camera, this looks really fake and characteristic. But if I talk like this, my tone is a little different. It means something more, and it's still relatable, right? And so I can also be, I could be sing-songing, what does that say about my character, and da-da-da-da. And on stage, that pulls off much better. But I could also just make my cadence of my voice just a little more sing-songy, and it's just a touch, a little flavor, and it's still believable, and I'm going to find out why I'm talking this way, right? And the last thing I'm going to talk about is cadence. And this is the easiest jumping board, diving off board into silence, is what it is. Now, cadence is how fast or slowly you're speaking. So if I talk like this and really fast, and like, what does that say about your character? What does that say about the situation you're in? What does it say about the situation if I'm talking really fast and maybe my mind's not moving as fast as my mouth is, and really, like, that's a fast speed, and that says either your character's anxious or there's a time limit or whatever it is. It just says a lot more about your character than talking like this, right? But if I slow down my words, that also says a lot. A lot. And see, that's like the little like jumping off point into getting into silence, where you can utilize silence. So cadence is something that you can easily discover in the middle of a scene as you're talking. Like, you can take that spot to really, your character can really think it out. Think it out. Like that. And that adds like this little like button where the people watching go, oh, what was that about? Once again, you can use this on stage as well. Cadence can also relate to your body movements. So you'll notice that as I'm talking, that I've been doing this, but I've also been like leaning in and moving my body. And so there's certain times that I'll choose to be fast, and at the same time, there's certain times I'll choose to be slower. Now, why is this good? This is good because dynamics are good, and some things are like this, and some things are like this. It's just like being outside, just like being under the covers. It's all these differences will make your scene just blow up and be beautiful and brilliant and stand out from other improv scenes. Last thing I want to say is, I know that the first time you do this, the first couple of times you do this, it will be because David said I should try this, so I'm just going to experiment with this, and it might be a little inventive. Try your best not to, at the top, you can if you want, if you just want to explore at the top of your scene, go, okay, this scene, I'm going to talk a little deeper, just a little deeper. There's also quality of voice. Like, I can be smooth with my words, or I can be a little like, husky with my words, or a little more gravelly with my words. And what does that say about my character? Now, in improv online scenes, like I said, you want to be more subtle because the subtleties are easier to pick up, because now, instead of like on a stage, there's the actors, and so if all their things have to be big and broad for movement, but now we're bringing it right up to the screen. We're bringing it right up to the person's face. So we can read a lot more subtleties in your face, in the tone of voice, all that kind of stuff. So if you want to, you can experiment with, for this one, I'm just going to come in a little bit lighter on my voice. We're going to see what this says about my character. We're going to explore what this means, because my scene partner's hopefully going to hear that change, that difference, and that's going to inspire them, that's going to welcome them to make a move, right? Or I could come in like this. I could come in just a little like this, and I could every now and then have a hard time, and that's going to say something else, right? If you want to do that. But what I really encourage people to do is to come in with nothing. That's one of my big things, because when you come in with nothing, you're also allowing people to contribute to the scene equally with their own experiences, their own background, their own voice. So if I come in to the scene and I'm looking at my scene partner, I'm doing with my scene partner, I'll come in with a little bit. Just maybe a little, I call it in my book, I call it the intention, come with an intention. So my intention just might be this, which is a physicality, that's all it is. Or my intention might be just to talk a little slower, right? But then once I've made that very small intention, I'm gonna let my scene partner tell me what they observe. Like, I'm not gonna tell my scene partner what to observe. I'm gonna read from my scene partner what they observe from me. So if I come in like this, and they observe like David's contemplative or thinking, and they go, and they don't have any words, then that's what the scene's gonna be about, is their response. It's not about the idea I had in my head, it's gonna be about their response, right? So then as I'm talking, I'll realize that my character, like, I just looked away. That's what I observed, is I just looked away when I made that point. So maybe my character is just someone that's constantly making these really quick movements. And I didn't invent that. I discovered that as I'm talking, I'm doing that. And this hand gesture comes out a lot. So maybe that's part of my character. And that's how moves in improv online scenes look more natural and relatable than, I have this idea for a big, broad character. You just start talking. And I realize as you're talking, you're doing something. Like, I realize as I'm talking, as my shoulders are kind of hunched, these fingers are coming out like this. And so now I'm just going to expand this a little bit more, but I'm still going to be authentic in my gestures, and I'm still going to bounce back and forth with the person that's giving me offers, with the person that's giving me information, but this is my character. And now it says, it's a point for not just your character, but the context that you're in. What is the context by which I would be speaking like this? Like, what is this saying? I have tension in my hands now. And that's just something discovered. I didn't start that sentence with that. I just discovered that in myself. And that's what I hope you do is, as you're discovering characters as the scene goes on, you're discovering these dynamics. What are the dynamics of my character, and how can I push it a little further that direction? Because that's a gift to my scene partner. Push it a little, not to the big and broad. I think a lot of times our anxiety is like, oh, there's nothing going on, so I'm going to make this big and broad. This is going to be big and broad because that's funny. And it's emotionally distancing. Be relatable. Relatable, it can be so funny. It can be so funny. Here's the last example, and then I'll call it because I realize I've been talking for a long time. Last example I have is I was working with someone, and they were giving me a video updating about what they're talking about, like for what they've been working on their projects, and it was about, talk. And then at one point, and they're cracking jokes because everyone wants to be like friendly on screen and everything like that. They're cracking jokes, and then like in 1 second they went, "Oh, my hair's a mess." That's when I laughed. That's when I laughed, was when that, "Oh, my hair's a mess," because I could. That's not really a punchline. That's not really a setup and joke. There's no humor there, right? There's no formulaic humor there. The only like formulaic humor there was like, I've been that person who's been talking for a while, then looked down for a second and went, and I'm really like right now I'm thinking my hair does look like a mess. I'm so sorry I didn't comb my hair. I think it got messed up when I put that hat on. Here, we'll use this to cover it up. But that's what my point is that like the relatable is the more funny. So go with the more relatable. I don't want to cover my eyebrows. I think that's what the issue is. I want to have that cloud. Look at that. The cloud is my eyebrows. But be in discovery, because being in discovery means hopefully the audience discovered it at the same time you did, and then that discovery becomes relatable, and then that pays off at the last end of the show. So those are dynamics with a little dip into discovery and invention as well. I hope you found it helpful, and you probably will find more on my book, this improv book. Bye, everybody.